What drives a poor boy from a forgotten village to rewrite the map of half the Pacific Ocean? How does an unremarkable youth become the captain of the Royal Navy, defying every expectation? This is the story of James Cook. Who was he, and what did he risk to change the world forever? The answers are buried in choices that no one could take back, in fears faced on the edge of the unknown. Friends, be sure to subscribe to my Quiet History channel, like it, and leave a comment of at least 7 words. This is necessary for the channel to function. Share this video with others if you think it's important. Thank you. Born on the 27th of October, 1728, in the tiny village of Marton, North Yorkshire, James Cook entered a life destined for hardship. Son of a farm laborer and a housewife, he was one of 8 children caught in the relentless grip of poverty. His childhood promised nothing beyond back-breaking work and early death. Yet there was a spark, an uncommon sharpness that caught the eye of his father's employer. This moment would shatter the chain of fate binding him to the soil. Against all odds, young James was granted a rare chance: education. Where most of his peers remained illiterate, he learned to read and write, unlocking a door to a world far beyond the dreary fields of Yorkshire. But knowledge alone was not enough. At 13, he left home to work in a coastal shop in the bustling town of Staithes, where the sea first whispered its call. It was here, amidst the salt and sails, that destiny tightened its grip. Imagine the restless yearning of a boy watching ships glide into harbor. Each vessel a promise of adventure, danger, and discovery. The cries of gulls, the creak of rigging, the sway of masts, all beckoned James with a force greater than any earthly ties. At 18, surrendering to this fierce pull, he made a choice that would define him. He became a ship's boy on a coal vessel, stepping into a world where every decision could mean life or death. James Cook was no aristocrat. He had no prestigious education, no royal patronage. The son of a farmhand carved his fate with calloused hands and a restless mind. How did this self-made man rise through the ranks of the Royal Navy to command expeditions that shattered centuries-old myths? What fueled his vision to challenge the very conception of the world's oceans? The answers lie in a collision of ambition, science, and the brutal politics of empire. In the 18th century, the oceans were a canvas of uncertainty, painted with monsters and myths. Vast stretches of water were marked by terra incognita, filled with dragons, sea serpents, and the fabled Great Southern Land, terra australis incognita, a massive continent believed essential to the planet's balance. This was no superstition, but scientific consensus rooted in ancient ideas of symmetry and harmony. But what happens when dogma confronts reality? Europe was in turmoil. Britain's empire was expanding. Trading companies prospered on spices and silk, while France and Spain fought desperately for control of the seas. Knowledge became power, as critical as cannon fire. Those who commanded accurate maps held the keys to trade routes and warships alike. Royal societies in London and Paris buzzed with debates on the Earth's shape, celestial mechanics, and natural forces. Into this charged atmosphere stepped James Cook, a sailor and a scientist, perfectly equipped to defy what everyone believed. His first expeditions would not only chart unknown waters, but dismantle centuries of assumptions. The stakes were monumental. One wrong decision could plunge a crew into madness, starvation, or death. Yet Cook pressed forward, fueled by a relentless drive to uncover truth where others feared to tread. Each voyage was a gamble with fate, each map a weapon in the battle for empire and enlightenment. But before the world knew his name, before the ships set sail, James Cook faced a more personal struggle to escape the constraints of birth and circumstance. How did the son of a farm laborer convince the powers that be to trust him with command? What inner fire burned so fiercely that he turned away from a safe, if dull, life in a shop to risk everything on the sea? The answers reveal that history is shaped by moments when fear meets courage and choice becomes destiny. This is not just the story of a man or a map. It is the tale of humanity's restless hunger for knowledge, the terrifying cost of exploration, and the irreversible decisions that force us to confront the unknown. James Cook's journey began in a humble village, but it ended with the rewriting of the world itself, a legacy forged by the indomitable will of one boy who dared to dream beyond the horizon. For more stories that unravel the threads of fate and history, subscribe to Quiet History and join us as we dive deeper into the moments that shaped our world. What makes a man risk everything to leave certainty behind? Why would James Cook abandon a captain's command for the unknown dangers of war? From the moment he stepped onto those grimy coal ships along England's eastern shore, Cook was no ordinary sailor. These vessels were the backbone of the British Navy's grit, ungainly workhorses hauling coal through treacherous waters where one mistake meant death. Storms battered the North Sea relentlessly, claiming hundreds of lives each year. But in this crucible of danger, Cook forged his steel. Imagine nights lit only by flickering candlelight. A young cook hunched over worn books he couldn't afford, scribbling maps and calculations. His mates mocked him. Why did a common seaman crave such arcane knowledge? Yet Cook understood that this painstaking study was his only path upward. Every chart, every coordinate logged, was a step away from the grim fate awaiting those who failed at sea. Mistakes were not forgiven. They were fatal. By the mid-1850s, Cook had earned a captaincy on a coal ship, an impressive rise for a man of his origins. But then, in a decision that stunned all who knew him, Cook turned down the captain's cabin to join the Royal Navy as an ordinary seaman. The 7 Years' War was raging, Britain and France locked in a deadly struggle for control over North America and Europe. The Navy desperately needed men, but Cook saw beyond the immediate chaos. He saw opportunity. Starting from the bottom once again, he didn't just survive, he soared. Within a month, promoted to boatswain's mate. Within 2 years, navigator. He found himself in the icy waters of Canada amid fierce battles for the St. Lawrence River. The French had fortified Quebec, their knowledge of the river's hidden shoals and currents a deadly advantage. British fleets faced nearly impossible passage. And then Cook was tasked with a perilous mission: chart the river, find a safe route through the deadly obstacles. Working under cover of darkness, Cook took soundings, mapped every hidden reef, every treacherous current. His maps were so precise that British warships slipped through passages the French believed impenetrable. The fall of Quebec was a turning point, a triumph born from the mind and will of a man who refused to accept defeat. For the first time, Cook's name echoed through the halls of the Admiralty, signaling the arrival of a navigator unlike any before him. After the war, Cook spent 5 brutal years charting the rugged coast of Newfoundland, producing maps so exacting and detailed they remained standard references for centuries. His relentless scientific rigor set him apart, measuring, calculating, and verifying with a precision unheard of in his day. Cook wasn't just a sailor, he was a pioneer of cartographic science, a man who embraced the unforgiving northern seas as his classroom. And then came the moment that would change everything. In the year 1769, a rare celestial event, Venus crossing the sun, offered a chance to unlock a cosmic secret: the precise distance from Earth to the sun. But to capture this, the observation had to happen far from Europe, deep in the southern Pacific, where no European had set foot. The mission demanded a captain with unparalleled skill, discipline, and trustworthiness. The choice was James Cook. The ship Endeavour, a refitted coal hauler, became the vessel of this audacious quest. Cook and his crew sailed into the unknown, braving the vast, uncharted oceans. They survived where others never dared to venture. Hundreds of years of indigenous survival contrasted with the fragile European intruders. After the astronomical observations, the journey pressed on northward, skirting Australia's dangerous shores through perilous straits. What would come next would seal Cook's legacy forever. His ability to read the oceans, stars, and currents made the impossible possible. Every choice, every risk he took rippled through history. Not just a man navigating waters, but a force shaping the future of exploration, science, and empire. In the shadows of those storms, victories, and cosmic mysteries, the true story of James Cook emerges. A man defined by choices no one else dared make. Will you follow the path of risk and knowledge? Subscribe to Quiet History and dive deeper into the untold stories that changed the world. What happens when a leader's desperate hope meets a deadly trap? Captain James Cook, after navigating treacherous seas and proving New Guinea and Australia were separate lands, steered his ship westward toward Batavia, the Dutch colony on Java. He sought supplies and vital repairs, but instead found a city riddled with disease. Malaria, dysentery, tropical fever. These invisible enemies ravaged the crew. Those who had survived storms, reefs, and starvation now fell victim to sickness. Within weeks, over 30 men died, including scientists and artists whose work was crucial to the expedition. Cook's spirit was crushed, but the nightmare was far from over. In a frantic bid to escape, Cook ordered the ship to leave Batavia, but the diseases clung to the crew like shadows. Men continued to perish during the voyage, their bodies succumbing to invisible killers. The once vibrant expedition was unraveling, inch by agonizing inch. On the 12th of July, 1771, the ship Endeavour set course north, skirting Australia's coast. Cook's relentless pursuit of discovery led him through a narrow, perilous strait between Australia and New Guinea, finally proving these were distinct lands. Yet, the cost of this triumph was staggering. By the time Endeavour returned to England after nearly 3 years at sea, only 56 of the original 94 crew remained alive. The losses were devastating. but the scientific achievements were unparalleled. Cook brought back precise maps of New Zealand and eastern Australia, rich botanical and zoological data, and detailed accounts of indigenous peoples. He shattered old myths, revealing that if a southern continent existed, it lay far beyond previous beliefs. His return was met with accolades, a medal from the Royal Society, a promotion to captain by the Admiralty, and headlines celebrating his feats. Yet Cook's hunger for discovery was far from sated. Within a year, preparations began for a second voyage, with a singular, daunting goal: to finally resolve the mystery of the southern land. Cook was given 2 ships, Resolution and Adventure, both converted coal ships, equipped with the latest chronometers and navigation tools, stocked with ample provisions. On the 13th of July, 1772, the expedition departed Plymouth, heading into uncharted southern waters where no European had dared venture. On the 17th of January, 1773, they crossed the Antarctic Circle, a historic first. Icebergs loomed, bitter cold gnawed at their bones, and fog swallowed the horizon. Fear gripped the crew. Many believed pressing further south would mean certain death, their ships crushed by relentless ice. But Cook pressed on, pushing deeper into the frozen unknown until the ice finally barred their passage. There was no continent, only endless ocean and ice. Over 3 grueling years, Cook crossed the Antarctic Circle 3 times, circumnavigated the icy continent without sighting it, and proved that if a southern land existed, it was a frozen wasteland, inhospitable and barren. This was both a monumental scientific victory and a bitter disappointment. The legendary southern continent, dreamed of for centuries, was nothing more than an icy desert. Yet Cook's journey did not end there. Between his southern forays, he explored Pacific islands, visiting Tahiti and discovering new lands like New Caledonia and South Georgia. He created maps that would remain authoritative for over 100 years. And perhaps most importantly, during this voyage, Cook solved the scourge of scurvy by enforcing a strict diet of fresh fruits and vegetables, saving countless lives and changing naval medicine forever. But with every triumph came heavy cost and impossible choices. Each decision Cook made, whether to push into deadly waters, to risk his crew's lives for knowledge, etched a path of irreversible consequences. His story is a relentless battle against nature, fear, and fate itself. Subscribe to Quiet History to uncover the untold stories behind history's greatest explorers. What if a single man's choices could save hundreds of lives where others failed? Captain James Cook faced a deadly enemy unseen, the scurvy that wiped out entire crews on long sea voyages. Yet through a relentless commitment to hygiene and nutrition, drinking lemon juice, eating sauerkraut, Cook shattered all expectations. Over 3 brutal years at sea, in some of the harshest conditions imaginable, not a single man under his command succumbed to this scourge. While rival expeditions lost half their men, Cook's crew stood unbroken. But how far would his revolutionary methods carry him? July 30th, 1775. Resolution returns triumphantly to England. Adventure had already gone back after the ships lost each other in the fog off New Zealand's shores. This second voyage was record-breaking. Over 110,000 kilometers traveled across the globe. Cook's name soared beyond the seas. He was knighted, awarded a prestigious medical honor, and even received royal recognition from King George III. The newspapers dubbed him the greatest navigator of all time. It seemed his career had reached its summit. But what happens when a legend refuses to rest? At 47, weary yet restless, Cook faced a fateful choice. A new mystery beckoned: the elusive Northwest Passage, the mythical sea route linking the Atlantic to the Pacific through the Arctic. For centuries, explorers had chased this phantom path, dreaming of transforming global trade. Britain dangled a reward of £20,000 for its discovery. The Admiralty turned again to Cook, knowing only he possessed the skill and resolve. Could he resist the call to complete the map of the world, or would ambition override his desire for peace and family? On July 12, 1776, Resolution set sail once more, accompanied by Discovery. Their daring plan: sail into the Pacific via the Cape of Good Hope, then push north along Alaska's coast in search of the fabled passage. Yet, amid the grand quest, a deeply personal mission awaited. Cook was to return a Mai, a Tahitian man who had become a sensation in London's high society after the previous voyage. The stakes were immense. Beyond exploration, this journey was about bridging worlds. But could they navigate the unknown without losing themselves? December 1776 brought them back to Tahiti, where Cook was welcomed like kin. The islanders remembered his fairness and kindness. Amaya was reunited with his people, bearing gifts of European goods, animals, and seeds, a fragile thread weaving two cultures together. Cook rested briefly, replenishing supplies and spirit before venturing onward. Yet, as the ships sailed further into the Pacific, the tides of fate were shifting in ways no one could foresee. January 18th, 1777. Discovery and Resolution reached a cluster of islands Cook named the Sandwich Islands, after the First Lord of the Admiralty, the Earl of Sandwich. Unknown to Europeans, these were the Hawaiian Islands. The locals greeted Cook as a divine figure during a sacred festival honoring their god Lono. His ships, with towering masts and white sails, were seen as celestial vessels returning home. What began as reverence would soon spiral into a catastrophic collision of worlds. Cook was no ruthless conqueror. He forbade unnecessary violence, traded rather than plundered, and documented indigenous cultures with scientific precision. He admired Polynesians' mastery of stars and currents, recognizing a civilization rich and complex. Yet, trapped by the prejudices of his era, Cook believed in the superiority of European progress and governance. What he could not foresee was the devastating legacy his voyages would unleash, a tragedy far beyond his control. After death, Cook's name became legend. His burial marked the end of an era that reshaped the world map and human history. But his story was not one of simple glory. It was a relentless saga of choices made under crushing pressure, of fears confronted and paths taken that could never be undone. What do we make of a man who dared to chart the unknown, knowing the cost might be the soul of entire peoples? Subscribe to Quiet History to dive deeper into the riptides of history's greatest voyages. where one choice can rewrite the world, the story is never finished. Who truly benefits from legends of greatness? James Cook, the man whose name graces cities, straits, and islands, was immortalized with statues and portraits in schools and government halls. His life was hailed as the ultimate meritocracy story. A poor boy who rose to imperial glory through sheer talent and hard work. But beneath the grandeur lay a harsh truth few dared to confront. Cook's rise was an exception, not a rule, in a rigid class society where most of his own kin remained laborers, trapped in poverty. His story was weaponized to justify an empire built on inequalities, where exceptions masked systemic injustice. Yet behind the myth, the reality gnawed. Cook's widow, Elizabeth, survived him by more than half a century, living in honor, but mourning endlessly. She bore 6 children with him, but not one lived past their 30th year. All 3 sons died young, serving on the very navy that carved their father's legend. The Cook dynasty ended before it began, leaving only echoes in maps and scientific reports. But what price did this legacy demand from his family? The scientific impact of Cook's voyages was colossal. Banks and Forster's collections laid the foundations of botanical and zoological museums. Hundreds of new species were cataloged. Astronomical observations refined our understanding of the solar system, and ethnographic records preserved vanishing cultures. Yet, every breakthrough carried a shadow no textbook dared to gloss over. Cook's maps became navigation Bible for the next century's explorers. His methods redefined expedition health protocols and set new scientific standards. But how differently did the world remember this man? In Britain and its settler colonies, he was a hero, an explorer whose name adorned statues in London, Sydney, and Christchurch. Yet beyond these shores, his legacy split like a fault line. Among the indigenous peoples of the Pacific, Cook's arrival was the beginning of catastrophic loss. The Maori saw him as the herald of colonization that stole their lands and sovereignty. Hawaiians viewed him as a paradox, respected for his navigation skills, but blamed for opening the gates to disease and destruction. His death site in Hawaii is a memorial, but each anniversary sparks protests, voices raging against the dark aftermath. This fracture in memory reveals deep tensions. Historians now prioritize indigenous perspectives that expose the devastating consequences of discovery. Museums return artifacts taken by Cook's expeditions to their rightful owners. Statues, once unchallenged, now stand at the center of fierce debates. Should they remain as history or be dismantled as symbols of oppression? The controversy over Cook echoes a broader reckoning. How do we confront a past where heroes were also agents of empire? Great civilizations, celebrated in history, often rested on slavery, war, and exploitation. Progress for some meant suffering for others. The Enlightenment, which Cook embodied, preached reason and science, but also justified colonial domination as a civilizing mission. Cook never questioned these contradictions. He was a man of the age of enlightenment, focused on practical achievement, unaware, or unwilling, to see the human cost of his voyages. His choices set irreversible chains in motion, changing worlds forever. But can we judge him by modern standards, or must we grapple with the uncomfortable truths his story forces upon us? How do we remember a man who shaped history but also heralded destruction? This is the question that haunts the legacy of James Cook, and perhaps the very way we understand the past. If you want to dive deeper into the tangled legacies of history's most complex figures, subscribe to Quiet History and join us in uncovering the stories that shaped our world. What happens when a man's simple duty spirals into a force that reshapes entire continents? James Cook wasn't a philosopher or a politician. He was a sailor, an explorer, driven by survival and discovery. He mapped, measured, and documented with precision. Yet every stroke of his pen unleashed consequences far beyond his intentions. His charts became blueprints for colonization, his journeys keys unlocking new worlds for empire and commerce. How much responsibility does one man bear when history moves like a tidal wave beyond his control? The shadows of those choices loom large, and the reckoning is far from over. Imagine a man from humble origins, the son of a farm laborer, ascending to captain the Royal Navy's finest ships. James Cook's life, though brief at 50 years, was a relentless climb fueled by grit and intellect. From an illiterate cabin boy to a respected member of the Royal Society, he shattered ceilings no one imagined. 3 circumnavigations, mapping a third of the globe, collecting scientific data that forever altered humanity's understanding of our planet. His triumphs were proof that reason, discipline, and perseverance could conquer the unknown. But beneath this heroic tale, a darker truth pulses. He was also an agent of an empire whose rise depended on conquest and subjugation. The knowledge Cook gathered opened doors for traders, missionaries, settlers, ushering in irreversible change for indigenous peoples. What looked like exploration turned into invasion. Cultures were uprooted, languages silenced, lives shattered. Can we judge Cook for the devastation that followed? Or do we question the empire that exploited his discoveries? These questions haunt the legacy left in the wake of his voyages. They force us to confront the paradox of progress, discovery as both enlightenment and destruction. Cook's maps were not just tools of navigation. They were instruments of imperial ambition. As the Industrial Revolution transformed Britain into the world's dominant power, the stakes grew higher. Steamships replaced sails, telegraphs shrank the world, and colonies became sources of raw materials and consumer markets. The empire reached its zenith in the 19th century, controlling nearly a quarter of the Earth's land and population. Yet the seeds of its downfall were sown at the same time. National liberation movements, world wars, economic upheavals. The world Cook charted would never be the same, and the tides of history turned against empire. Today, the countries Cook mapped, Australia, New Zealand, the Pacific Islands, stand as independent nations, but the scars remain. Economic inequality, cultural trauma, lost languages, and shattered traditions echo through generations. Modern historians strive to tell a fuller story, one that merges Cook's journals with the voices of the Maori, Hawaiians, and Australian Aboriginals. They seek to understand not only the European perspective, but also the responses of the indigenous peoples to these epical encounters. New research reveals that Polynesian navigators had crossed the Pacific long before Cook ever set sail, mastering the stars, currents, and winds on their own sophisticated canoes. These incredible achievements were overshadowed by European narratives for centuries. In this light, Cook's figure becomes less a mythic hero and more a complex human caught in the machinery of empire. A man who expanded humanity's horizons, but also helped dismantle ancient worlds. This fusion of discovery and destruction was never simple or noble. It was a paradox that still defines our present. Knowledge brought conflict. New horizons closed old ones forever. The consequences of Cook's voyages ripple through time, challenging us to reckon with history's double edges. And yet, despite the contradictions and suffering, we cannot deny the magnitude of what James Cook achieved. Picture a man from a poor village, uneducated by formal standards, rising to the pinnacle of his profession through sheer will and intellect. He sailed further than any before him, surviving dangers that claimed many lives. He created maps used for centuries, enlarged the boundaries of human knowledge, and proved that the human spirit can overcome almost anything. In today's world, as we look at the maps he made, we see not just lines on paper, but a web of irreversible choices, choices that shaped empires and lives. The history of James Cook is a chain of fateful decisions, rippling with consequences that still challenge us. His legacy forces us to confront the uneasy truth. Greatness and tragedy often walk hand in hand. To understand James Cook is to confront the complexity of history itself. It is to listen to the silenced voices, to weigh achievement against cost, and to learn how fragile the balance between exploration and exploitation truly is. If you want to dive deeper into the tangled legacy of explorers like Cook and hear the other side of history, subscribe to Quiet History, where we unravel the past with honesty and depth. What if everything we thought we knew was only the surface? What if the mysteries of our world have merely shifted, hiding where we dare not look? James Cook faced these questions head-on in a time when the unknown was vast and deadly. But what did he discover? And at what cost did he unravel the world's secrets? The journey to truth is never simple, and his story is no exception. We no longer see blank spaces on maps. Every inch of the globe has been measured, photographed, and catalogued. Yet the enigma only deepens. The greatest mysteries now lurk in the dark depths of oceans we visit less often than we travel to space. They hide in the impenetrable jungles of the Amazon, where untouched tribes live beyond time's grasp. They reside in the labyrinth of the human mind, puzzles only beginning to unravel. The questions about life's origins, civilization's future, and the very meaning of existence remain as elusive as ever. Cook hunted answers for the world of his era. He found some. He disproved the existence of a southern continent as it was then imagined. He proved the Northwest Passage was impassable. He charted the vast Pacific Ocean with painstaking precision. But each answer birthed new questions. Each revelation opened horizons wider and more daunting. Knowledge does not conclude, it expands relentlessly. In that relentless expansion, Cook was not the end of an age, but the spark that ignited a new one. He revealed a world far greater, more complex, and more breathtaking than anyone dared imagine. He showed that man could understand this world if only he dared to work, risk, and learn. But what became of the vessels that carried this vision? The Resolution rotted away, dismantled for firewood. The Endeavor sank off the American coast, lost to the depths. The discovery served a short while longer before fading from memory. Yet Cook's legacy survived through his maps, his journals, his methods, his name. His legacy belongs not to Britain alone. It belongs to all humanity. Geography recognizes no borders. The ocean does not belong to any nation. Knowledge belongs to everyone. And in an age when the world fractures anew, when walls rise instead of bridges, Cook's story reminds us of another path, a path of exploration, understanding, and connection. Cook connected worlds. Yet he did not always do it right. He made mistakes. He was part of a system that inflicted harm. But his thirst for understanding, his respect for knowledge, his willingness to see the beauty and complexity of other cultures, these endure as a complicated example, not one to blindly emulate, but to deeply reflect upon. Every generation rewrites history because every generation asks different questions of the past. To Cook's contemporaries, he was an empire's hero, a master of the seas, a pioneering discoverer. To the Victorians, he was a symbol of British greatness, proof of racial superiority. To us, he is a far more complex figure, brilliant navigator and scientist, but also an agent of colonialism's dark machinery. To those who come after us, he may embody something else, a symbol of an era when humanity first began to comprehend its planet. An example of how personal triumphs can be co-opted by systems beyond control. A reminder that knowledge itself is neutral, but its application is always political. James Cook was neither saint nor villain. He was human, complex, contradictory, talented, stubborn, courageous, sometimes cruel, sometimes merciful. A product of his time, yet also an exception to its rules. He rose above the limits of his birth. He achieved what once seemed impossible. He changed the world, and the world changed him. When Cook died on the shores of Hawaii, surrounded by a furious crowd, what was running through his mind? Did he regret the choices that led to his demise? Did he realize the fatal mistake of trying to hold a chief hostage? Or did he cling until the end to the belief that control was still within reach? History left no answer. But his deeds remain, speaking of a man unafraid of the unknown, who believed in the power of knowledge and dedicated his life to unveiling the world's mysteries. Today, tourists flock to the places Cook unveiled. They visit Tahiti, admiring beaches and palms. They journey to New Zealand, marveling at fjords and mountains. They live in Australia, in cities mapped by Cook's hand. Yet most know little of the peril, the toil, the sacrifices behind those charts. His story is a chain of fateful decisions, each choice a step deeper into the unknown, each discovery shadowed by irreversible consequences. It is a tale not just of exploration, but of human fear, ambition, and the complex legacy left behind. James Cook dared to cross the boundaries of his world. His voyage was not only across oceans, but into the very heart of what it means to seek understanding. If you've felt the weight of this story, consider what it teaches us today about knowledge, power, and the fragile threads that connect humanity. Because in every age the same questions await. Will we build walls or bridges? Will we learn from the past or repeat its mistakes? Will we dare to explore the unknown, even when the cost is high? If you want to dive deeper into these stories, follow Quiet History. The past is never just history. It's the living pulse of our world, challenging us to look beyond, to question, to understand. Because James Cook's journey is far from over. It lives in every exploration taken, every map redrawn, every truth sought by those who dare to ask. What price was paid for the lands that became tourist destinations? What stories were buried beneath the polished monuments and street names? The history of indigenous peoples has been reduced to mere background, scenery for the curious traveler. Yet this history still lingers, haunting the museums, the debates, the very fabric of our collective memory. And in this shadow, the legacy of James Cook looms large, a man whose voyages changed the world forever. But at what cost? James Cook sailed hundreds of thousands of kilometers across uncharted waters. He saw what no European had ever seen before. He encountered peoples unknown to the Western world, gathering knowledge that laid the foundation for Pacific sciences. His voyages set new standards of precision and discipline, inspiring generations of explorers to come. But beneath these triumphs lies a darker truth, one that questions the price of discovery and the irreversible consequences of his actions. Cook proved that with reason, planning, and relentless determination, the impossible could be achieved. Yet no amount of personal virtue could erase the systemic fallout of his journeys. Even the noblest intentions spiraled into tragedy. History, as Cook's story reveals, is never simple. It is a tangled web of decisions and consequences, of human fear and irreversible choices. Still, Cook's story continues to inspire, not because he was flawless, but because he was human. A man who refused to surrender, who sought knowledge when others accepted ignorance, who pressed forward when others retreated. He believed the world could be understood through effort and courage. This message resonates today as much as it did 2.5 centuries ago. We live in a complex, contradictory world, facing challenges that seem insurmountable. Climate change, social inequality, conflicts between nations. Cook's history reminds us that humanity is capable of greatness, but only if we are willing to work, to learn, and to overcome our fears. Yet we must be wiser than Cook and his contemporaries. The lessons of colonialism demand respect for all peoples and cultures, a commitment to cooperation over domination. We can preserve the spirit of exploration, the thirst for knowledge, while honoring those who expanded the boundaries of the known world, and remembering those who suffered in the process. Learning from the past is our only hope to build a better future. James Cook was born into a world of sails and wooden ships. He died in that same world, but the seeds of transformation had already been sown. The Industrial Revolution was just beginning. The steam engine had been invented, but was not yet powering ships. Electricity was a scientific curiosity, not a source of energy. Photography did not exist. Radio was unheard of. Airplanes were mere fantasies. Cook's world was one of slow communication, long voyages, and limited information. Yet it stood on the brink of humanity's greatest upheavals. He did not live to see these changes, but his work helped lay the groundwork. His maps opened new trade routes. His methods made long-distance sailing safer. His scientific observations expanded humanity's understanding of the world. All of this created the foundation for globalization, industrial capitalism, and the empires of the 19th century. Cook could not foresee the full impact of his legacy, but his contribution was profound. Today we live in a world shaped by the choices he made, choices that echo through time with both promise and peril. So, what do we do with this legacy? How do we reconcile the spirit of discovery with the shadows of exploitation? The answers are not simple, but the questions demand our attention. Because history is not just a story of the past, it is a chain of fateful decisions that shape our present and our future. If you found this journey through history compelling, subscribe to Quiet History for more stories that challenge what we think we know.